Sometimes the hardest people to forget are the ones who never fully let you go emotionally. They may not call you anymore. They may act distant, silent, or completely focused on their own life. But deep inside, something about the connection still remains unfinished. And strangely, you can feel it. Not because of fantasy, not because you are overthinking, but because emotional attachment leaves traces behind. Real feelings rarely disappear overnight. They hide in silence, hesitation, ego, memories, and unspoken emotions. And when someone is still emotionally attached to you, their behavior starts revealing it in quiet psychological ways. Sign 1. They randomly reappear after long silence. One of the strongest signs someone is still attached to you is when they suddenly come back after disappearing for weeks or months. Maybe they send a small message that looks casual on the surface. Maybe they react to your story, like an old photo, or ask something completely unnecessary just to restart contact. People who are emotionally detached usually move forward consistently, but emotionally attached people move in emotional waves. They leave when emotions become overwhelming, then return when the distance starts hurting them too much. The confusing part is that they often disappear again after reconnecting. This happens because they are fighting an inner conflict. One part of them misses you deeply, while another part fears vulnerability, rejection, or emotional intensity. So they come close enough to feel connected again, then pull away before things become real. Their inconsistency is not always lack of care. Sometimes it is emotional confusion. And even though their actions hurt you, the truth is, emotionally detached people rarely feel the need to come back at all. Sign 2. Their silence feels heavy, not peaceful. There is a huge difference between peaceful silence and emotional silence. When someone is truly over you, their absence feels calm, almost emotionally neutral. But when someone is still attached, their silence feels tense and unfinished. You can almost feel words being held back. It feels like something emotional still exists beneath the distance. This usually happens because they constantly think about reaching out, but stop themselves at the last moment. Their ego, fear, or overthinking becomes stronger than their emotions. So instead of expressing what they feel, they choose silence as emotional protection. But silence does not mean emotional freedom. In psychology, emotionally attached people often suppress communication because talking would force them to face unresolved feelings. And unresolved feelings are uncomfortable, especially for people who fear vulnerability. That is why their silence feels emotionally loud instead of empty. Deep down, they are still emotionally connected, but they are trying to control it instead of expressing it. And honestly, controlling emotions is exhausting, which is why their silence often feels emotionally heavy to both of you. Sign 3. They still watch your life quietly. When someone is emotionally attached to you, they usually struggle to completely disconnect from your world. Even if they never speak to you directly, they still pay attention quietly. They watch your stories quickly. They notice changes in your life. Sometimes they disappear for days, but suddenly return online when you post something emotional. This behavior is deeply connected to emotional attachment psychology. When a person develops a strong emotional bond, the brain creates emotional curiosity around that person. Even after distance, their mind still seeks emotional updates because part of them remains psychologically connected. They may pretend not to care publicly, but privately they still want to know how you are doing. Not because they are obsessed, but because emotional attachment creates invisible habits. You become emotionally familiar to them, and emotionally familiar people are difficult to ignore completely, especially if feelings ended without proper closure. Watching your life from a distance becomes their way of staying emotionally connected without risking direct vulnerability. It is safer for them to observe quietly than openly admit they still care. Sign 4. They never give you full closure. People who are emotionally done usually give clear endings. Their words, actions, and energy all point toward emotional finality. But someone who is still attached often leaves things confusing and incomplete. They avoid direct conversations about the ending. They disappear without fully explaining themselves. Or they say things that create emotional uncertainty instead of clarity. This happens because giving closure also forces them to emotionally accept losing you. And emotionally attached people are rarely ready for that. So instead of closing the door completely, they leave emotional gaps behind. Those gaps create confusion for you, but comfort for them. Because as long as things feel unfinished, part of the connection still exists psychologically. Deep down, they are not fully ready to release the emotional bond. That is why conversations with them often feel emotionally unresolved, like something important was never fully said. And honestly, unresolved emotional connections are some of the hardest things for the human mind to let go of, because the brain naturally keeps searching for endings to emotionally incomplete stories. Sign 5. Small things still remind them of you. When someone is emotionally attached, memories connected to you stay emotionally active in their mind. Songs, places, smells, random conversations, certain dates. All of these things quietly bring you back into their thoughts. Emotional attachment works through association. The brain connects emotions to experiences, and strong emotional relationships leave deep psychological imprints. That is why people often remember someone unexpectedly, even after long periods of silence. And emotionally attached people experience this constantly. They may hear a song and suddenly think about a moment with you. They may visit a place and instantly remember your energy there. The difficult part is that these emotional triggers often reopen feelings they were trying to suppress. So instead of reaching out honestly, they stay silent and process everything internally. This creates emotional tension inside them, because forgetting someone emotionally is very different from physically losing contact. Physical distance can happen quickly. Emotional detachment usually takes much longer, especially when feelings were deep, intense, or emotionally unfinished. Sign 6. They act cold, but emotionally reactive. Sometimes emotionally attached people behave in confusing ways. They act distant, cold, or emotionally unavailable, yet react strongly whenever your attention shifts elsewhere. Maybe they suddenly become different when they see you moving on. Maybe your happiness affects them more than expected. Or maybe they pretend not to care, but their behavior changes emotionally whenever you become less available. This happens because emotional attachment often creates hidden emotional sensitivity. Even when they suppress their feelings consciously, their subconscious emotional bond still reacts. Psychology calls this emotional displacement. A person hides their emotions verbally, but their behavior unconsciously reveals emotional investment. That is why emotionally attached people often struggle to remain emotionally neutral around someone they still care about. Their ego may say, stay distant, but their emotional system reacts differently. And honestly, emotionally detached people rarely react strongly to someone moving on. Strong emotional reactions usually mean strong emotional attachment still exists internally, even if they are trying hard to hide it. Sign 7. They compare other people to you. Emotionally attached people often struggle to emotionally connect with others the same way. Even if they start meeting new people, part of their mind keeps comparing those experiences to what they felt with you. Not because you were perfect, but because emotional familiarity creates deep psychological patterns. Once someone becomes emotionally significant, the brain naturally uses that emotional experience as a reference point. So new connections start feeling emotionally different or emotionally weaker in comparison. This does not mean they cannot move forward someday, but it does mean your emotional impact on them still exists strongly. And honestly, this is why some people enter new relationships but still emotionally remain stuck in the past. Their heart tries moving forward while their emotional attachment remains behind. That emotional conflict creates confusion inside them. Sometimes they even avoid serious emotional connections because subconsciously they are still emotionally attached elsewhere. And even if they never admit it directly, their emotional comparisons quietly reveal the truth. Sign 8. They keep finding excuses to contact you. Emotionally attached people rarely contact someone for no reason. Usually they create small excuses because directly admitting emotional feelings feels too vulnerable. They may ask random questions, send unnecessary information, or suddenly talk about something insignificant from the past. On the surface, it looks casual, but psychologically, these small interactions are often emotional attempts to reconnect safely. They want emotional closeness without fully exposing their feelings. That is why emotionally attached people often test emotional availability slowly instead of openly expressing themselves. They fear rejection, emotional disappointment, or losing control over their emotions again. So they choose indirect communication instead. And honestly, if someone truly feels nothing anymore, they usually stop searching for reasons to maintain contact. Emotional attachment naturally creates emotional pull. Even when someone tries resisting it mentally, part of them still seeks connection emotionally, which is why they continue finding tiny ways to re-enter your life, even temporarily. Sign 9. They remember small details about you. When someone remains emotionally attached, they continue holding emotional memories connected to you very deeply. They remember things you barely mentioned once, tiny habits, random conversations, your emotional reactions, your favorite things, the way your voice sounded when you were sad. These details stay because emotionally attached people pay attention emotionally, not just mentally. Emotional memories are stored differently in the brain than ordinary information. They become connected to emotional significance. And the stronger the emotional bond, the stronger those memories remain. That is why someone emotionally attached to you can suddenly bring up details you forgot yourself. Because emotionally meaningful people stay active inside the emotional memory system much longer. Even after distance, even after silence. And honestly, people rarely remember emotional details about someone they no longer care about deeply. Emotional memory usually reveals emotional attachment more honestly than words ever could.